So, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us again for this month's Equity Matters. This month, we will be having a conversation about seasonal affective disorder. And we have two guests that will be speaking with us today. Our subject is Shine a Light on Health Equity, Overcoming Seasonal Affective Disorder. So we will have a full conversation, hopefully a robust conversation about what is seasonal affective disorder, some strategies that you can take away of how to mitigate any impact or anxiety or stress that comes from seasonal affective disorder. And then we'll just also have a conversation about what is 988. That is a new number within North Carolina that people are able to reach out to when they're having mental health challenging moments. So we want to start with introducing our guest panelists today. On our panel today, we have Ms. Jamila Jackson Kelly. She has her master's in education. She's a licensed clinical mental health counselor. And tell me what NCC is.
National Certified Counselor.
National Certified Counselor. And she's with Urban Healing Counseling. Urban Healing Counseling, which is out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And we also have Miss Brittany Jones. Brittany also is a licensed LCAS. I want you to tell me.
So a licensed clinical addiction specialist.
And she is with our North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and she is a 988 lead. So we will start with Jamila. Jamila, tell us about who you are and how you've come to Equity Matters today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. As you mentioned, I am a licensed clinical mental health supervisor, counseling supervisor. I've been in the field about a little over 13 years. I have a variety of experience with crisis resources. I actually worked on a crisis hotline for 24-hour crisis hotline for over 11 years. I've also worked in methadone clinics and with domestic violence survivors as well. And so right now I'm in the private practice realm, and I'm the executive director at Urban Healing Counseling, where we focus on the needs of Black and Brown folks.
Thank you so much for sharing. And we have Brittany. Brittany, tell us how you've come to Equity Matters and, excuse me, also your background, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm a licensed clinical addiction specialist and also a certified clinical supervisor for the substance use license as well. And I have a background in clinical psychology. So I have my master's in clinical psychology. I'm not licensed as a psychologist in the state of North Carolina, but I do have that background. And so I started off working, just in various roles in mental health. I was an intake coordinator for a treatment facility for people with eating disorders. I've worked in a community mental health setting for people with opioid use disorder. And now in my role at the Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities and Substance Use Services as a 988 grant lead, I promote 988 and talk about 988, just making sure that everyone knows that that's a resource available.
I appreciate you. Well, I also want to highlight that we also have something in common. Brittany, we're both Eagles, so Eagle Pride. And we're also Rams, so we appreciate you. We don't want to leave Jamila out. Jamila, where'd you go for your school?
I went to Georgetown University, and for my graduate work, I did UNCG.
Oh, God bless you.
I'll take the shade. It's okay.
Oh, yeah, the Lord looks after you also.
Yes. I still found my way to be working with Urban, right? So I still love my people.
Yes. So we're gonna go right into it. So first of all, can you define what seasonal affective disorder is?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Let me share my slides.
Okay.
All right, I believe you should be able to see this, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So seasonal affective
It's in
disorder.
presentation mode
Oh, okay.
because we can see your notes.
Right. I just did this and it wasn't like that. Let me try one more time. Sorry about that.
No worries.
right. Do you see anything now?
Not yet.
Yeah, no.
All right, so screen one.
Now it's coming. There it
Yep.
is.
Okay, perfect. There I am. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for your patience. All right. So seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, which seems a very appropriate acronym, is more than just winter blues or sadness during the shorter days, though it does happen very often when we experience the end of daylight savings time. It has to do with the length of daylight that we usually experience in this hemisphere. It's characterized by the symptoms that really affect your daily life, and it usually improves in the spring. And it also affects about 5% of U.S. adults. And it's experienced about 40% of the year. So that is a big part of our year. And even though it seems to be really associated with this time of year, it can occur in the summer, and it has a different presentation when it does. Typically can begin at any age, but it's usually seen between 18 and 30, and women are at a higher risk, with only about 20% of cases affecting men. So some symptoms to look out for. So if you're having mild symptoms or mild presentation, this would be symptoms that last less than 2 weeks. And so this would be like an overall feeling of malaise or feeling down, but you're still able to take care of yourself and others. You might have some trouble sleeping, right? It might not feel quite right. And some of us experience that when we push the clocks back or forward anyways. And then noticing that you have less energy than usual, but you're, again, still able to, pull through, take care of yourself, take care of others, and do your job in whatever school and housework that you might have. So, when you're seeing these symptoms in the mild stage, you might want to try to, indulge yourself with some more self-care, right? Doing something you enjoy, eating healthy, avoid consuming extra sugar in both our food and drinks, because drinks can have a lot of sugar in them. Going outside and getting some of that natural sun, that can really help increase our vitamin D stores. And when you're out in the sun, of course, you want to remember to wear your sunscreen. And then you also want to spend time with family and friends and your pets, because they can really help you maybe feel better during this time. However, that doesn't help, and you notice that things are lasting longer than 2 weeks, you might be experiencing severe symptoms. And so that would be noticing that you might be withdrawing socially, not really into the same things that you used to be into. It's just not bringing you the same amount of joy. Oversleeping and still not feeling rested. So you get a lot of extra sleep and you're like, oh, I still feel groggy. Gaining weight. Some people might lose weight, but a lot of times gaining weight is a sign. And people often crave carbohydrates and sugary foods like candies and cookies and sweets. And during the holidays, we have a lot of those in abundance, right? And so it's something to keep in mind as we go to the Thanksgiving dinner table in a couple of days. What is it behind my cravings? Am I just enjoying it because it's my Aunt Pam's favorite dish that she cooks, or is it like I really feel like I need to eat this to fill another void? And so then if you have these more severe symptoms, you might want to seek medical attention for sure, and they can help you get connected with light therapy. There's actually light therapy that happens with a box that you do for a certain amount of time every morning, and it can be really effective. It can actually be as effective as taking antidepressant or doing therapy. Talk therapy, psychotherapy is also another great way to manage seasonal affective disorder, as well as vitamin D supplements. You want to check with your doctor first before you do any extra supplementation, but this can also help you get your body ready and kind of overcome these symptoms. And then of course, other medications such as antidepressants can be helpful as well. And in my last slide, I'll just give a couple other things to note about seasonal affective disorder. You want to seek the help of a medical professional to help manage these symptoms and to get access to the treatments. Regarding therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, has been known to be really effective and really helpful with this type of depression, as well as the antidepressants that I talked about, the SSRIs, and light box therapy during the winter months. Though it doesn't work for everyone, these are some of the most common treatments that really help. And then the other thing to consider is ruling out other medical conditions that might be causing your symptoms, because it has been noticed that people can be misdiagnosed with this if they also have hypothyroidism, hypoglycemia, which affects your thyroid glands and your sugar, how it is in your body, and then as well as infectious mononucleosis, or mono. And other viral infections can kind of, have similar symptoms. And so you want to make sure you get the right diagnosis, because the treatment really, really matters. And you don't want to be treating yourself for something that you don't have. And then, of course, if things get worse and the depression is very severe and you have any kind of suicidal thoughts, you want to seek crisis services.
So with that in mind, thank you so much for sharing all of that information. What are some of the common misconceptions that people have about seasonal affective disorder among the general population? And how would you suggest that we increase awareness to improve overall community health outcomes?
Well, there's a few myths out there, so I'll go ahead and bust a few of those. So one of them that it only occurs during the winter, which I kind of touched on earlier. It actually can happen in the spring or summer. And a lot of times it can depend on what climate you come from and what you're used to versus what you are moving into. So recently I was talking with someone about, studying abroad. So if you go from Africa to a place where it's really cold, you might experience it in a different way. So it's not just in the winter months. Just keep that in mind. Another myth is that light box treatment is always gonna work, and that's not the truth. Really any treatment doesn't work for everything, right? And so it's effective, but there's some folks that it doesn't work for, including people that might have bipolar disorder, or if people have eye problems, it might not work for them. Another myth is that SAD only impacts people living in overcast climates, meaning that you have a lot of cloudy days. You may be like Seattle, there's places we think of as being traditionally rainy. It's really not about the quality of light, it's just about the duration of sunlight that area of the world gets. So it's not really about the brightness of the light. Also, another myth is that seasonal affective disorder only affects women, which is not true. Women are affected in a ratio of 4 to 1 to men. So that means there's still about 20% of men, or 20% of the folks that are affected by SAD that are men. So that is something to keep in mind too. But as with all, mental health diagnoses, there's a stigma, unfortunately, that we're trying to eradicate. And when it comes from men being affected by depression specifically, it's harder for them to come forward, but it does affect them as well. And then another one is that SAD is a minor form of depression. And in fact, SAD is actually a type of major depression. It should be taken just as seriously as any other type of depression. It can have very serious symptoms, as I listed earlier, and some of them, when really severe, can even lead to thoughts of harming themselves. And then my last myth is that people with SAD can just snap out of it. Like, it's just a mood thing. Like, you just need to cheer up, right? But that's not it at all. It's actually, it's not caused by a negative attitude. It's caused by actual abnormal physical changes that happen in the brain and the body, and in response to the physical environment regarding the amount of sunlight in your environment.
That is so interesting because you're correct. I often thought that when it comes to seasonal affective disorder, it really had more to do with the sunlight because I've heard that I think Chicago and Seattle, that people who live in those particular regions are diagnosed with SAD more. And I thought it was directly attributed to the fact that they were not getting as much sunlight, or even Alaska, that they were not getting as much sunlight. And so that's interesting to learn that it's not directly correlated with that.
Yes, and it has a lot to do with melatonin and whatnot in our body's internal clock and their circadian rhythms. And so really what happens is the hypothalamus in our brain, it kind of is light sensitive. And so when it's not getting the amount of light it needs, it kind of starts producing extra melatonin, like when there's a lot of darkness. And as we know, because people take melatonin supplements now, it increases sleepiness. And so it kind of like all goes together. And so we want to make sure that, we're getting that right balance, so that we're not kind of triggering our brain to produce more melatonin because we're not exposed to enough light. So yes, it's about the length of light and not just the brightness in those areas.
Would you say that seasonal affective disorder, that it actually impacts or it affects African Americans or Black and Brown populations more than it affects other general populations?
So I did do some digging and looking into research, and it looks like at the same kind of altitude and areas of the world, it really affects us about the same as others. However, in general, people of color are more susceptible to depression than our white counterparts. And so because we are more susceptible to general depression, it is true for SAD as well. And so I did read that researchers believe that SAD may have disparate or different effects on Black Americans because of how it generally presents in our communities. And vitamin D deficiency actually comes up with this because we are generally known to be more deficient in vitamin D. And I think some folks don't know that, but that is something that's kind of known in our community amongst, I guess, doctors. And so In the United States, Black and Latino people are more likely to be at risk for depression than white people, according to a 2018 study that included more than 12,000 participants. And this was ranging from 2005 to 2012. So this has been looked into. And they even tried to attempt to, to account for these historical drivers for depression in Black communities, including, stress, chronic stress due to racism and economic inequality. And even when they consider that, Black participants in the study were still more likely to be at risk for depression. And so, yes, it is something that we need to be concerned about and knowledgeable about in our communities.
Brittany, since Jamila has shared so much information about seasonal affective disorder, that leads us right into 988. Do you mind sharing with us, like what is 988 and how can it be used to impact when people are experiencing anxiety, depression, or just having a mental health moment?
Absolutely. So I have some slides. I'm gonna try to share. Give me one moment. I'm trying to share it in presentation modes. Do you guys
Go right into the top, and you'll see it in your the burgundy inside of the burgundy. You'll see it up there.
Are you guys seeing the slides?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so we can skip over that because you guys know who I am.
You're also in note mode.
Okay. So how do I get out of note mode?
Go down to in PowerPoint. What I found is if you go down to the bottom, and in the very bottom on the right, you'll see about a little icon that says slideshow next to where you can adjust the sizing, and it will pop it into presentation mode for you.
Okay. All right. I think I got it this time. Let's see. Am I good?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So I just wanted to share some information on 988 because we know that's an excellent resource for people to be able to connect and talk with someone and get connected to resources in their community. I'm also going to highlight another line that we have in North Carolina called the Pure Warm line, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But when you think about someone who is experiencing a crisis or having a mental health crisis in North Carolina, there are 4 different levels of care. So these care, we're looking at those as someone to contact. So being able to reach out to someone kind of when you're in that crisis mode or need to talk to someone to respond. So those will be your co-responder models or your mobile crisis team, your MORS team that will be able to come to you if you need assistance in home. And then a safe place for help. So we're talking about your behavioral health urgent cares, your facility-based crisis, peer and community respites. And then also in that continuum is your continuum of care with your outpatient providers that you've already may already have established relationships with, or getting you connected to outpatient providers. So I'm going to be talking about the 988 and the Pure Warm line. So let me go to the next slide. So 988 is a simple 9-digit number similar to 911 that you can dial on your phone to connect with a counselor. It's available 24/7. You can also text 988. So literally you could pick up your phone and just text to 988. To connect with a counselor. And there's also an option to go to 988lifeline.org and chat with a counselor from the website. It's 100% confidential, and you do not have to share any identifying information with the counselor that you don't want to. So like if I, call 988 and I don't want to disclose who I am or where I'm calling from, but that I just need to talk to someone about the situation going on, I can do that. You could also text the same way. You don't have to disclose any kind of information about yourself. If you're wanting to get connected to like resources in your community, you might have to disclose like, hey, I live in Wake County. I need, X resource. Or I live in New Hanover County, I need to be connected to a counselor in my area. Also, when you call 988, you'll hear a short prompt. It'll tell you you've reached 988. You can press 1 if you're a veteran, because we know that people connect better with people they know, they feel like they have a connection with and maybe have a similar background to them. So we know maybe a veteran might have a better connection in talking with someone who is also a veteran and has been through similar experiences with them, like they've had. So you can hit 1 when you call 988 to get connected to the National Veteran Crisis Line. You can hit 2 if your native language is Spanish and you want to speak in your native language to someone while you're in crisis in Spanish. You can do that as well. And then there's a third option. We have an LGBTQ plus line for ages 13 to 24 to be connected to that line. If you are a part of that community and feel like you would be better connected to talking to someone that has similar background and experience. There's also an option to be directly, if you're deaf or hard of hearing, there is a 988 line for you to be connected to American Sign Language call center. You can normally, if you're calling with a special video phone, it'll connect you automatically because it's knowing that you're calling from that video phone. But there's also, I think, an option when you dial 988 that you could say you need American Sign Language and they'll connect you as well. So when you think about 988, like some of the things that people, ask are like, when do I call 988? So what is it? A crisis looks different for everybody. So, if you're feeling, overwhelmed or helpless or hopeless, that's when you can reach out to 988. You're not alone. You can reach out for help. You might have a loved one that's struggling with feelings of sadness or being disconnected, or not behaving as they typically would. You could also reach out to 988 in that situation and get connected to resources for that person, to get, resources in your community. And if you or someone is struggling with thoughts of harming themselves or someone else, you can also reach out to 988 in this situation. So there's no there's no general, nothing too small. Like if you wanted to connect to talk to someone, you don't have to be in a situation where you feel like you're going to hurt yourself or someone else to reach out to 988. If you just want to talk to someone, 988 is there to connect to. All right. So I just like to talk a little bit about confidentiality with 988, just so that, everyone is aware. 988 is, confidentiality and privacy is taken very seriously at 988. So they work very hard to ensure privacy and confidentiality with their callers. And like I said before, when you call, you can share as little as much information as you feel like sharing with your counselor. If you want to remain completely anonymous on the call, you can do that as well. The number one goal for calling, when connecting with 988 is to be able to help you, to get you help when you need it. So we understand that, trust is essential, and providing the effective support in 988 is committed to protecting people's privacy and personal information. So there are some few legal exceptions for when information has to be disclosed, and it's similar to when you're in therapy, right? So if you're in therapy and you're working with a therapist, if the therapist determines that there may be an imminent risk for harm, like you might say that you're going to harm yourself or someone else, and they've assessed that that might essentially be the case, that is an exception to the confidentiality. Also, if there's abuse or neglect suspected, then that's a legal exception, as well as if it's required by court. That's a legal exception. So I just also like to give people a little bit of information about our call center and our stats. So since we started 988 in North Carolina in July of 2022, we've had we had 121,795 contacts. That's people reaching out to 988 from to date. And then our average call answer time. So like the amount of time it takes when you dial 988 to connect with a counselor is 14.2 seconds compared to the national average of 33 seconds. And then 98% of the call answered, or when you call, 98% of the calls are answered compared to the national average of 90%. And this is a screenshot from our dashboard that is up to date. So when you go to our website, which I can send the link in the chat, you can click on the dashboard for that, and you can see like the breakdown. As you see, most people are calling for interpersonal or family relationships. So they're calling about getting resources for someone else or for their family. And then it goes on from, someone's calling about they have depression or anxiety, they want to hurt themselves, that sort of thing. And then you can also see like the breakdown of the counties of where people are calling from. Now, this is for people who are disclosing that information. I like to say that up front. So like if I call anonymously, I'm not going to provide that information of where I'm calling from. But if someone else does call and say, I'm calling from, Castle County, then we'll be able to add that information to the dashboard.
Based on that information really quickly,
Mhm.
I'm looking at the counties. So is it saying that the darker counties have, from what they have reported, so let me say that from what people have disclosed, is that saying that the darker counties have a higher amount of people who have called from that section?
So we also use that we compare that to the population of that county. So they call the most compared to their population in that area. So if you see, it says contacts per 10,000 call. So we compare, like, say, some areas are more populated than other areas. So we compare that compared to the population of that county. Like, say, my parents are from Castle County. You'll hear me say Castle County all the time. But so like Castle County has a population of X, and we've received that number of call, that volume compared to Wake County, so that we can see and break that down of, obviously in general, if we didn't do that comparison, Wake County is going to have more general calls because it's a higher population.
Yeah, I was asking because I'm looking down there in that bottom T90 little color and I see New Hanover. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
we're a little dark. So is that saying that, that we have a higher amount of callers that are coming in from utilizing 988 from that particular region?
Correct, compared to your population of New Hanover County.
Okay, so that would be like, for example, our a comparison county for us would be Burke County. Which is in Western North Carolina. So based upon the county size, it appears that we might have a little higher amount of those who are reaching out using 988. Okay, I got it. Okay.
Cool. And I always put the disclaimer too that I'm not a statistician. I didn't go to school for statistics, but we have
Neither
people
did I.
behind the scenes working that out.
Yes. I've got to take biostat next semester, and I'm not looking forward to it. So
I got through mine. So all right, so here are some facts about 988. About 60%, I kind of went into that a little bit in my last slide. About 60% of individuals reaching out to 988 are reaching out to the first time. The other 40% are repeat callers looking for additional support. About 75% of individuals that call report thoughts of suicide, report improvement in how they feel by the end of the call when they connect with their counselor. So, people are feeling like they're being able to get connected to the resources to mitigate their crisis situation. And then just, when I mentioned this in the previous slide, but you can reach out to 988 when you're concerned about someone else. So if my spouse or my significant other, I feel like a concern for them and I want to be able to connect them to resources, I can call 988 and say, hey, I'm worried about my spouse. Is there any resources in my area that we can connect to help my spouse out? All right. So the other line that I mentioned in the beginning that I wanted to highlight is our Peer Warm line. So in conjunction with 988, back in February, we launched the Peer Warm line to provide support for North Carolinians who may not necessarily be in crisis, but want to speak to someone and get connected to resources. We also recognize that it is sometimes it's sometimes easier to speak to someone who has lived the same experiences you have walked in the same shoes that you've had. So we wanted to be able to provide that support for North Carolinians. So this line is staffed by certified peer support specialists. The Peer Warm line offers the unique perspective of shared experiences and connecting people to resources, as the staff peer support specialists are in long-term recovery from mental health and or substance use disorders, and can connect callers with the perspective of I've been there and I've gone through similar things and this is what helped me get better. And it's also available 24/7 as well. So thank you guys for allowing me the opportunity to talk about 988. Please remember that you are not alone. If you're experiencing a mental health crisis or you need to talk to someone, there's help out there. There's hope. You want to call, text, or chat 988. No judgment, just help.
Could you go back to the previous slide that you just had?
The Peer Warm line? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I love this. So this is advocating for and enlisting those that have lived experience. Am I correct?
Correct.
So how do you know how people become a certified peer support specialist and to participate with Peer Warm Line?
Yeah, so there is a process. So there's like classes that you take to become a certified peer support specialist. I don't know the specific classes, but I know Behavioral Health Springboard through UNC has, I think they have a program where you can look on their website and see how to become a peer support specialist there. And I think there's different pathways, but I think ultimately you have to consists of taking some classes, which it's like a so many week. It's not like a semester type of thing, but so many week classes. And then you, I think, get like this certification certificate saying that you're a peer support specialist.
And also, as I was reading the language on this, it says living in recovery with a mental health illness and or substance use disorder. Is that specifically speaking to those that may be recovering from substance use disorder, or is that someone who they have had mental health experiences, not solely connected to substance use disorders?
So it could be either or. And so I guess when you're talking about the people who staff the line, that could be someone who's had like a mental health, experience and has came on the other side of that, or they could have a substance use disorder and have come on the other side of that, or they could have both. Like they could have had a mental health and substance use disorder and have come on the other side of that to be able to work with the peer.
Okay. We have a question from chat, and the question is, what if someone needs ongoing support to address their issues but do not have insurance?
That's a good question. I know some community mental health centers out there, they have support for people who don't have insurance. So they would be able to I guess through their intake process, be able to connect to resources to be able to still support you. So you could definitely connect to 988 and they will be able to direct you to what community health resource, community health, mental health center is in your area to be able to connect to that resource. I know, for example, I live in the substance use space. So I know like Port Health, for example, I think is out in the eastern part. They have and again, I'm removed for a couple of years, but like they at one point when I was working had resources to be able to support people without insurance.
Yeah, I think that also I want to highlight the fact that here in New Hanover County, we do have Coastal Horizons. We also have the Healing Place that are available if someone is dealing with substance use disorder. And also, I want to let others know who do not know that if you call 911 within New Hanover County, we actually have licensed clinical therapists that are in our 911 center. And if you're having challenges, it's actually the year anniversary for our 911 clinical therapists. They will connect you to someone. So you actually have multiple options. You can reach out to 988. You can call the 911 center. Actually, like I stated here in New Hanover County, and in addition to also call the Pier 1855 Piers, North Carolina. One of the reasons why we're talking about seasonal affective disorder this today or this season, as far as Equity Matters is concerned, because not only are we acknowledging that as times change and we're going into darker times as far as the weather and late setting the time is setting a lot later, but it's also this time of year that people are experiencing more challenges. We have Thanksgiving for those that observe Thanksgiving or Friendsgiving that's coming around the corner. We also have Christmas that's coming around the corner, Hanukkah that's coming around the corner, Kwanzaa that's coming around the corner. At the top of the year, we've got Ramadan. So
Right.
during this particular season, it sometimes can be stressful. People are thinking about their loved ones that are no longer here with them. For every 4 years, we have an election that is stressful for those. There is something called election disorder or election anxiety, excuse me, that people experience. So it's very for some. Some may see it like, oh, I just love Christmas and I love the joy that it brings. But right now, for some people, this is really a stressful time of year, more so than any other part of the year. They're contemplating economics things. How do I pay my bills? They're thinking about how do I buy gifts. So it's so many things that are on people's mind. Most people generally think that this time of year should be lighthearted and fun, and we're thinking about all those family moments. But if you don't have a family to share with, or if you've lost someone, I know I have someone in my family that recently has passed on, and so this is going to be our first year without them. This is overwhelming for people. And we want to make sure that we are giving you strategies that you can incorporate. What I would encourage anyone to do right now is put in your phone 988 in your phone, and put in your phone. Well, we all should know 911, but if you don't, put 911 in your phone. Take this number, 855 Piers, North Carolina. Go ahead and put it in your phone. And then in that moment, you don't have to worry about trying to remember 988 in 911. It may be easy numbers for us to say right now, but when you're stressed out and you're having an anxious moment, your mind goes blank. You can't even probably remember your name sometimes. I can tell you that I've had that experience where you can't remember your birthday. You go blank. But if you can look at your phone and you see that already there, you could just hit that and it will automatically dial for you. That's what I would encourage you. If you have seniors and you're a caretakers, take that number and program it into their phone for on your behalf. For those that have still landline phones, put it on a refrigerator, put it in their bedroom, somewhere that is noticeable that they will be able to access, so they can call also. So these are just some tips of how you can utilize this without being stressed or adding more to your plate when you are going through these moments. Are there some other strategies, Jamila or Brittany, that you can offer during these stressful moments and during this time?
Well, I also wanted to add, I put it in the chat underneath the question that you can also reach out to your local MCO or LME. There's been a lot of restructuring in North Carolina over the past few years. I used to work for a major MCO as supervisor of the crisis line. And when you call those lines, when you call the MCOs based on your region, you can get connected to an intake appointment for outpatient therapy to have ongoing support. And if you ask about IPRS funds, IPRS is the acronym. Those are funds specifically set aside by each county for folks that don't have insurance. The main criteria that you live in the county you're seeking services in, you are you have little to no income. So if you're not working, or if you you're not making the above the poverty level, you can qualify. And if you have a clinical need to be seen, those are the main criteria to access those IPRS funds. And as someone who worked in that department for a long time, I made lots of appointments for folks that just needed the support and didn't know this was available. So I'm putting that out there. The link is there. You can click there and look at the map of the state, figure out where your county fits in and which MCO is yours. They kind of recently merged, so they're bigger and there's fewer of them now. There used to be 7. So I wanted to put that out there for ongoing support. But yeah, these are great tips. Really being prepared, having these, in your phone is a great idea, because when you're really faced with a crisis, a lot of people kind of freeze and they don't know what to do. They're just like, oh no, who should we call? And there's so many resources available. So becoming familiar with them ahead of time is really important. And then just not neglecting your everyday self-care. Like, we don't really, think, oh, it's really serving a big purpose in the long run. But if we keep up with our routines that keep us feeling good, it can be really something simple, but if we kind of neglect those, or let them go in time, in the interest of time, because we're trying to do for others, or we got to get all this, cooking done for Thanksgiving, or, we're just busy shopping and whatnot. We neglect the little things that kind of keep us going throughout the year. If we do that now, it's really kind of set us up to not do well. So we need to keep up our routines of self-care, as little as it may seem, that really can help us, kind of stay in this kind of help the body do what it needs to do. And so, don't forget your self-care through the holidays.
And I just want to add that it's okay to not be okay. Like
Mm.
sometimes we feel like we have to be okay, and we have to keep going and keep pushing. I watched a video this morning that reminded me that just because I'm the person that can do something doesn't mean that I have to be the one that do it every time, right? So just knowing that it's okay to not be okay, and taking that space for yourself if you need to. Like if this, holiday season is going to particularly be hard because you may have, for example, lost someone throughout the year, knowing that I just need to take that time to myself to go through my healing process, go through my grieving process. And that may look different than what the holidays have looked like previously, and it's okay.
And I have to agree with you with that. That's something that I tell my friends and family on a regular basis, that it's okay to not be okay. So often, especially as I'm not leaving men out, but generally, most of the time, women always feel like we have to we've got to put up a specific front and carry ourselves. We always have to be, just so. And you don't always have to be just so. If you're having a moment, you don't have to answer that phone call. You don't. You don't have to be, answer that doorbell, if that is. Now, I would not, don't get in the habit of not answering the doorbell or not answering the phone call. But when you're having that moment and you need to tap out, it's okay. Tap out. If you have to leave work early that day, one of the things I tell my friends and family, you don't have to give an excuse for taking care of you. You
Right.
don't. So, if you have to go and say, let your supervisor know, I need to leave for today. That's all you have to say. You don't have to give any additional explanation behind it or anything like that, because taking care of you is more important. You're your own best advocate. And if you don't speak up, no one is knowing what you're going through. No one knows that, situations are happening at home, or situations are, if you're like me, an adult student, and it could be stressful. I know this past season I had class Monday through Wednesday, in the evenings, 3-hour classes Monday through Wednesday, also a single mom, also working full time. I thought I was about to lose my mind. And I had to really just and my body was showing it. I was actually saying, "Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay." But those who are close to me were looking at me and looking at my face like, "Fawn, you sure you're okay? Are you sure that you're okay?" Not only was my face showing it, but my body was showing it. I was getting tension. I pulled my back out. Just a lot of different little things. And we don't attribute that to actual mental health. We think it's, oh, well, I'll just keep going. But your mental health will impact the rest of your body in a physiological way if you do not take care of it. It will cause you to have high stress. It can cause you to have high blood pressure. It can cause you to have diabetes, or increase your diabetes, your sugars, as far as your diabetes. It can impact you in so many different ways. If you're also dealing with cancer, they tell those who are dealing with cancer to try to be in spaces that are going to be a lot less stressful, because we know that when you are going through treatment, not only is that already hard on your body, you need to be in a healthy mental health space. Studies have shown that those that have some type of spiritual connection, so however you label that they have better health outcomes because they have incorporated some type of spiritualness that they can find to reset themselves. So what we're trying to encourage you to do is find something that is going to help you reset and allow you to be in a calm space, if that makes sense. When we are talking about seasonal affective disorder, do you think that one of the questions that came is, how familiar are counselors with SAD?
I would like to say that they are, but I would tend to think they're not as familiar, honestly. In my training, I don't recall it being like a huge focus of our material. But again, there's a lot of diagnoses out there. The DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that we follow, gets updated every few years. But SAD is an important one. And I think if people live in certain areas, I think it's more important to kind of be aware of that. But I think really my orientation is very person-centered. So when I'm doing an assessment, I make sure it's thorough. I'm going through all the questions. An assessment might take more than one session because I want to make sure I really get to know, about these symptoms, how they're affecting the client. And I really believe that my clients are the experts of their own lives. And so I ask, like, well, how long has this been going on? Have you noticed this before? How did it mitigate itself before? How did you get better from this before? And if we're seeing like, oh, it was in the wintertime and then, by springtime I felt better, then that might be a clue to be like, okay, let's look more into this, area of it. And then of course, I'm always, I consider myself a holistic practitioner, both as a doula and as a therapist. And so I'm always encouraging my folks to go to the doctor. Make sure that you're going to the doctor, you're having, your blood levels checked for different vitamins and minerals, and making sure their body's getting what it needs to really be its best self, because there can be a lot of mental health issues and symptoms that can stem from deficiencies in the body physically. And so I want to make sure they're, at their optimal health, and that there's not something else that could be causing this. So yes, it's very important for counselors to be aware of this, but also for clients to advocate for themselves too, and be like, something doesn't feel right. I've noticed, the last couple of years, this has kind of been my pattern. It's important to look into that. And if it's untreated 1 year, it will return and it can get worse in the future. That's something to keep in mind.
You mentioned vitamin D earlier. I know that you're not an MD or a nurse practitioner, but I did learn recently that women of color are typically diagnosed with vitamin D deficiency more so than others. And you also addressed that a vitamin D deficiency can impact seasonal affective disorder. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, because we get vitamin D naturally from the sun. And so when we're inside all day, if we're not, if it's cloudy for multiple days in a row and we're not getting that sunshine, it can affect our vitamin D, stores in our body. And so we want to make sure we're supplementing if that's necessary. Of course, check with your doctor. But yes, it is very common in our society, in our community. I'm not sure exactly why it affects us the way it does. Maybe because we're busy working. Maybe our jobs tend to be inside. Maybe because we're not out in nature and doing things historically like maybe some other communities do. But yeah, it's very important for us to get that vitamin D because it can affect your immune system. Vitamin D is very important for your immune system, and it can affect rates of depression.
Brittany, when we are talking about mental health issues in terms of reaching out, how frequently, I know that we are seeing, as far as the data that you have in there, but as far as the tools are concerned, would you say that people really are utilizing tools a lot more to find ways to help be preventative when it comes to mental health outcomes?
Absolutely. I'll say, I feel like there recently been more of a focus on people's mental health. So people are aware of some of the tools. I will say, and we're speaking about equity. There's still certain people that seem to be missing from the data. So just working to promote and letting people know about 988. And I know sometimes stigma gets in the way of like people utilizing the resources, not knowing, for example, if they contact this, like how much information am I going to have to share about myself? What will that mean? If I share certain information about myself, but so that's where, I try to work and, the people that I work with try to help promote 988, kind of let them know that this is a resource and you don't have to share information about yourself if you don't want to. With the Peer Warm Line, you don't have to share any information that you don't want to share about yourself. They're generally both there to help, to be there to connect you to resources that you may need, for whatever situation you're going through. So working to promote equity within that, making sure certain groups know about 988 is a resource. I know some of the campaigns that we've done as far as like marketing and trying to get the information about 988 this past year has focused on HBCUs and going into campuses and letting them know about 988 and letting them know that there's a resource to connect to and that it's not okay to be not okay. And being able to be able to connect to help when you need it is the most important thing, because we want you to be here. We want you to be able to grow and flourish and continue on your educational journey, whatever that may be for you, whatever that looks like for the future for you. But just being there to like educate and within certain populations, like we look at data, for example, to see like what's going on with people reaching out for 988, for example. So we know younger people are more prone to text 988 versus calling. We know that, more the older population that are used to calling people want to call 988 and talk to someone. So trying to leverage those things in those populations to continue to spread the message about 988.
What about what are other strategies that you all use in terms of reaching out to those that English is not their first language? I know that you have a line that those who are Spanish can reach out to, but what about those who may not be Spanish? Are there other ways that they can connect in if they're having challenges?
Yeah, so I know we've done a campaign in the past to specifically target the Hispanic population and letting them know about 988. So marketing campaign. We also have worked with an organization in North Carolina called El Futuro to make sure that they are working with our call center to make sure that they're providing culturally sensitive services. So making sure that they're aware of some of the cultural barriers to treatment, and that if someone calls and they're speaking with them and they may be from, for example, a Spanish background, helping to make sure that they're able to address and communicate with them and do the things that they need to do within the call to connect them to resources.
You spoke about reaching out to HBCUs. I love that. One of in public health, we have a theory. It's called weathering, and basically weathering is how chronic exposure to stressors can cause Black women to age faster and experience poorer health outcomes. When we're talking about 988, how do you all get connected? If someone calls and they want to have a culturally concordant person to speak with, and so that they can kind of level set and have someone that understands or they can connect to with the things that they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. So we make sure that we have in our call center staff that we have a diverse amount of counselors that are able to connect that are on shift. So that's part of like making sure that our call center has that as a resource available. So if you call and you say, hey, and we don't necessarily, because it's over the phone, you don't necessarily know someone's ethnicity or background, but if you're like, hey, these are the things that I need, making sure that we have that person on staff that can kind of meet some of those needs that someone's calling ask about. And then if, for example, we don't have that, making sure that we're just having those discussions like, hey, we've gotten 5 calls this week asking for someone that looks like this or is like this or has this personality. Is that something we need to like regroup on and, look at our hiring and hiring model and see why are we not getting that within our call center? So those are the certain things that we're definitely like continuing to like look into and, examine over the course of time as we're getting data in.
Jamila, when we are talking about mental health specifically for our historically marginalized populations, our Black and Brown populations, how important is it to make sure that there's culturally competent care and that care is done from a cultural perspective when it comes to mental health?
It's super important, honestly. I mean, traditionally, we don't have a lot of spaces that are our own, right? And so making those communities feel welcome, feeling understood, feeling seen is really important. And so, in our marketing materials, for instance, with Urban Healing Counseling, that is our focus. And so you'll see on our website and our materials that you see folks that look like us because, we're the ones who are the counselors. We want you to feel comfortable. And I think my clients really appreciate, that they don't necessarily have to explain certain things when they're talking to me, right? Like we kind of have a shared understanding because we have shared background. And so that's really important for people, for all people, when they reach out for care, that they want to be understood and seen. And so that then they can dive into like the real problems of what's going on, but they have to have that kind of emotional security and safety of seen and understood first.
And
Yeah.
that kind of, sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
jump
no,
in.
go ahead.
I was going to say that kind of goes into why there's a Spanish speaking line for 988, because if English isn't your first language and you're going through a crisis, you don't, like you said earlier, Fawn, sometimes in a crisis situation, you might not even remember your own name.